WarnerMedia, owned by AT&T, is announcing major restructurings in their content division. This is not at the DC Comics level. DC Comics is owned by WarnerMedia, which is owned by AT&T, but it's definitely coming. All right, we're going to get into this article. Before we can get into this article, we have to do this article. And this article goes back to look at where DC Comics fits in AT&T's vision for WarnerMedia. You have to think in terms of that to kind of comprehend what's going on with the WarnerMedia consolidation and layoff announcement. We will get into this article. Before we do, if you want to support my work, definitely subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications. That's a huge help to me. You can also check out collegeofthedead.com and get a copy of College of the Dead Graduation Day. It's the second in my ongoing series. And also, go to epicmermaids.com. You can sign up for The Mermaids. It'll send you an email when the comic's going to launch. It's a great book. It's a full-color series, Epic Mermaid Fantasy, Game of Thrones, really, with mermaids. Back to the article. All right, so the announcement is WarnerMedia's CEO Jason Kilar on the new structure, layoffs, and future of HBO Max, theatrical distribution, linear TV. This is pretty extensive. What he announced he's doing is this. WarnerMedia CEO Jason Kilar shook up the top ranks at the AT&T-owned company today, WarnerMedia, consolidating all film, TV, and streaming content under Warner Brothers and Sarnoff. The sweeping restructuring includes expanded responsibilities for HBO Max's Andy Forssell and HBO's Casey Bloys, and the exit of top WarnerMedia HBO Max executives Bob Greenblatt, Kevin Riley, and Keith Kokoza. Like any major consolidation, there will be a ripple effect. There's strong speculation that more restructuring at the lower levels as well as major layoffs are coming on Monday. So this is the higher level at WarnerMedia. This is between their major content divisions of film, TV, and streaming, like everything that they own. Comics are in there somewhere. It's down below the lower levels. So they're kind of starting from the top down where they're restructuring these pieces. So first, we really do, though, have to look at this article. Where does DC Comics fit in AT&T's vision for WarnerMedia? This is by Rob Salkowitz in Forbes. He's also on Twitter. I suggest following him. He's a good guy. He does some good pieces. All right, so Rob starts off earlier this month at San Diego Comic-Con, and this was from 2019. Returning attendees noticed a major change on the show's massive exhibit floor. The booth for DC Comics, which had been a massive standalone pavilion in the center of the publisher's area and in the center of the hall, was gone. America's oldest and second largest comic book publisher had retreated to the far back corner of the hall where it was incorporated into the multi-level WarnerMedia exhibit in the shadow of banks of giant monitors previewing upcoming shows and cast appearances. The subtext of this move could not have been clearer. AT&T, now the parent company of WarnerMedia and its divisions, including DC Comics, previously known as DC Entertainment, HBO, Turner, and Warner Brothers, and now HBO Max, does not seem terribly interested in being in the comic book publishing business. They jump to conclusions with this. They do not want to spend high-level management executive time at like corporate CEO level or even corporate WarnerMedia level messing around with DC Comics. But it is a small business for them. It's telling that in a long profile of AT&T CEO John Stankey this morning in Variety, DC was one of the only WarnerMedia brands that was not mentioned. Comics are the redhead stepchild. They do get left out a lot of times, and it used to happen all the time in prior to AT&T's acquisition of Warner as well. To the extent that DC matters at all in the company's future, it's a source of owned IP for other media channels and a lifestyle brand to serve as an ambassador to geek culture. Yes, but the source IP is very valuable. It's very, very valuable because even the most trivial character or story, look at what Harley Quinn came out of nowhere. They've messed up the recent film, but if they did it properly, it could be a great film franchise. The comics obviously sell Harley Quinn, but it's an open door to develop all that stuff. Aquaman was a huge financial success for them. Wonder Woman was a huge financial success for them. They own all of this stuff, and it can drive activity with all of their licensing, all of their products, all the video games in the world they want to produce, and differentiate themselves from other streaming services, movie studios, all the things that they're trying to do. They have a theme park operation, like all those things. In terms of pure economics, that makes sense. The entire comics publishing business in the U.S., including periodicals, digital, and trade, adds up to around $1.1 billion. It's $1.2 billion now, though that includes crowdfunding. It includes things that you really shouldn't include. It includes manga. On a good month, about 35% of the revenue from the direct market goes to DC, along with a chunk of trade book sales for perennial titles like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, as well as other graphic novels. That wasn't ever very much in the Time Warner days. It's a smaller drop and even bigger ocean following the AT&T acquisition. Yes, AT&T at the top is not going to go chasing after $50 million in revenue somewhere and spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff. But if they generate enough in licensing and publishing to cover their costs of operation, and they can continuously put out IP, as well as keep the IP alive. Because it's one thing to license out comics. They can't license out all of their characters. Their main ones, absolutely they could. But, they have a library of thousands of characters, and they're constantly creating new characters. To keep those active, they need to publish themselves. No one's going to want to license characters that, Mr. Mixelplick or whatnot, that can't stand on their own as a license, but can fit in within a universe of characters and their own projects. They need to obviously be careful about that. And incidentally, as far as where this revenue breaks out, like this is the bookstore trade for 2018. Shockingly, Scholastic had 33%, a massive amount. They actually have 40% going into 2019. DC Comics has a very small percent. They only have 10%. Marvel 9%. But they're only doing 10% of that book trade, which is about a third of that $1.1 billion that they're referencing from 2018. Just to keep it in perspective. So it's even smaller than they're kind of indicating here. There's another ocean in play as well. An ocean of red ink at AT&T. Their debt following the $85.5 billion WarnerMedia acquisition standing at $164 billion. The company obviously believes it can monetize the WarnerMedia assets to make that back quickly, but that's a huge sword hanging over the management's head. And that kind of thing gets division chiefs thinking about short-term wins rather than long-term strategy. Now, he's jumping ahead here. No, they did not assume that they could just buy WarnerMedia for $85.4 billion and then quickly pay it off. They would pay it off as quickly as they could. But AT&T has steady cash flow, meaning AT&T, the phone operation. It really does. We all pay those phone bills every month. All that money needs somewhere to go. So the idea is, okay, they've got multiple subscription platforms. One of them is your AT&T phone service. Another one is whatever internet service they're providing. Another one is their HBO Max, which now has more than 4 million subscribers. That worked out very well for them. Another one is HBO, which they have, what the hell do they have? Top of my head, I think they have 18 million subscribers, something like that, which generates a lot of revenue for them. So they're really in the subscription business over at AT&T. So to platform the subscription business, it's a combination of technology as well as intellectual property. And you need to have healthy amounts of both of those. And multiple subscription platforms. Not an absurd amount that they're unmanageable. You want to have a few robust revenue-generating subscription platforms, like the long-distance phone business, like an HBO Max business, like whatever else they can kind of put aside and generate. They have also DirecTV, which is a subscription-based business, and that, unfortunately for them, is not working out as well as the acquisition could be. It was like a $50 billion, off the top of my head, acquisition, and it's worth about probably half of what it was they paid for it. It's losing, it's lost maybe 5 million subscribers since they acquired it. So, however, they're going to have to be very clever about how they deal with that, because if they sell it or they merge it with their competitor Dish, they'll lose somehow about half the value what they paid. They're going to have like a $20 to $25 billion write down for that. Moving along. And the division chiefs are not going to be making short-term decisions. maybe he's upset about San Diego and having a lesser presence at San Diego. The purpose of being at San Diego, who knows what San Diego is going to be come 2021, but they don't need to put a lot of effort into going crazy at San Diego. They need to kind of get their ducks in a row and figure out what their strategy is going to be overall. One place that AT&T does not seem to see any value is in sub-brands. We were just talking about this. One of the company's first moves following the acquisition was to shutter several of WarnerMedia's niche streaming services, including the beloved cinephile outlet Filmstruck, seen by many as a prelude to rolling as much of the company's media artillery into possible into a mega streamer to compete with Disney, Netflix, and the rest. A move that essentially, given the precipitous drop in subscribers to AT&T's satellite TV service, yeah, they have to do that. That's essential for them to do that. Because DirecTV is not working, and they're not going to try to get their TV revenue through DirecTV. So they've done HBO Max. It's launched, and within a month, like its first month of launch, it did 4.1 million. They have Friends coming out on that platform. They have a bunch more stuff coming out on that platform, and they have the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League coming out on that platform. They have other theatrical projects. They'll probably do what Disney Plus is trying to do through that platform. They'll build HBO Max just fine. Plus, they have HBO itself. They're obviously going to try and take HBO with the cable subscriptions and ultimately try to merge that with their streaming. I mean, it's going to take time, but they'll figure out their opportunities of how to do that. These niche platforms are not important. Niche IP is important. Why? Why is niche IP important, but a niche platform like this Filmstruck is not important? Because Filmstruck, even though it's clever and it's probably worth a few $1 million, few being like 5, 10, whatever, it's a tiny platform. So you can't take existing IP and exploit it throughout Filmstruck. Filmstruck is never going to have 100 million subscribers. They have no need for that. But it's not to say, as already been proven, that you couldn't take Wonder Woman or Superman or Harley Quinn or Justice League or whatever the heck the next thing's going to be, Green Lantern, and then distribute that across a bigger platform like HBO Max, and then build HBO Max into a genuine competitor with Disney. They don't need a bunch of little tiny platforms that nobody's going to be interested in. They need a big platform, and they need IP that can go across that big platform. And they honestly, of course, don't know what IP is going to work. That's going to be a huge hit. You kind of never know in publishing. The Mandalorian worked incredibly well for Star Wars. They, I'm sure, thought it would work well, but they had no idea it was going to be a massive hit and absolutely drive Disney Plus's subscriptions up to 60 million. 60 million was like their 5-year goal at Disney. They're in a year or so, or less than a year. Well, whatever it is. And they've hit 60 million, like a 5-year goal. It's phenomenal. That's why niche IP is valuable. But a niche platform, it's only good as long as you need it. You always better deal to another platform. But that sentiment has also crept into the publishing side. In recent months, DC has dropped the axe on its prestige imprint Vertigo, the creative engine behind hits like Sandman, Preacher, Swamp Thing, Doom Patrol, and Fables. Yeah, but it wasn't producing anything good. It was like Eric Esquivel's titles and stuff like that. There were no great titles coming out of Vertigo, so there weren't going to be anything good. You need creative leadership at the top of that editorially to bring in Sandman and Preacher and other amazing projects that then could be niche IP across a mainstream platform. That's what they want. And if there's no leadership there, they're not going to keep it. They also needed to close it because of all those scandals with the people they hired from Vertigo. On the eve of Comic-Con, the company announced the cancellation of Mad Magazine, the venerable humor magazine that changed the face of American satire and has been continuously published since the mid-1950s. Neither of these was a big moneymaker in terms of month-to-month sales, but both brands occupy some valuable real estate in the psyche of fans. No, because people really didn't care about Mad Magazine anymore either. It's always... A brand is not a name. A name is something that will get someone's attention. Like, oh, I remember Mad Magazine. I remember Vertigo. Oh, sure, Sandman. Well, what's the content you're doing? Then people look under the hood. And if there's nothing under the hood, they ain't going to buy the car. Neither of these moneymakers, even if the properties built on that land are in disrepair, it seems short-sighted to vacate the premises. It's a matter of having editorial vision. If the editorial vision isn't there to get people enthusiastic about the content that you're publishing, then the brand should be retired, at least temporarily. And that's all it is. They could always bring these things back if they have ideas that are going to be worth doing. In place of a robust and differentiated publishing enterprise, AT&T appears more interested in boosting DC as a consumer lifestyle brand. Warner Brothers' efforts to bring DC superheroes to the big screen have been hit or miss and suffer especially in comparison to the gleaming chrome-plated juggernaut that is Disney's MCU. But producer Greg Bertolini and his team have developed a creativity and commercially satisfying empire on television with the Arrowverse family. Well, yes, but they've had some successes now since this article, obviously. Wonder Woman's a huge success. Aquaman a huge success. They're definitely getting there. DC Universe also features a chat show, DC Daily, which also has been stopped, in which a gaggle of media-friendly young people enthuse over the latest comics and culture offerings. It's a well-conceived strategy to combat the encroaching hegemony of the Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Pixar pop culture machine. For all its might, Disney seems wedded to a very clear vision of market segmentation where the Marvel Comics brand, including its animated TV components, must first and foremost deliver Disney to the teen male fan base. Well, they've also updated that as well. Even the separately managed MCU wipes the floor with all categories at the box office. DC also has an edge that few people talk about in terms of logo design and iconography. DC has fantastic logos. They do. Marvel has some good logos too. They don't use them as much as they could. DC has always been great about using their iconic logos as well as their title logos. So yeah, absolutely. Everyone knows what the heck these logos mean, and that is fantastic for DC, and they will use that. So where does all that branding leave the DC publishing business? A generation ago, faced with a similar situation, DC's co-president and publisher Janet Kahn appealed to Time Warner management that wanted to drastically cut back on DC's current publishing in favor of reprints, saying that the company's new material was the lifeblood of the company, a source of new fans and new IP without which the characters and related merchandise would decline into obscurity. She's right about that. She won that argument at DC under her stewardship, ending up minting many of the golden coins in which it still trades, including Dark Knight, Watchmen, and Sandman. See, there's editorial leadership. Editorial leadership is knowing how to, sometimes you're coming up with the idea, sometimes you're hearing the idea from the talent, and you get people working at their best. You create a situation where super talented people are passionate and they're working at their best, and you have a vision for your editorial of what you want it to be and where things fit. You can make some really, really great products, despite never being a gigantic engine of revenue within the Time Warner corporate umbrella. Well, it's completely irrelevant. That's not an issue. AT&T's not concerned about, DC Comics isn't making enough money this week. Let's make some changes there. They're not fooling with it. It's not worth their time. They know it's not worth their time. But they will consolidate. There's no question they're going to streamline. They already kicked out Diamond as a distributor because they wanted to change the nature of how their physical comic books and books were sold to fans, to consumers, when I say fans, I mean fan fanatics, like collectors. The collector's market has been changed forever. So DC cut ties with Diamond comic distributors. This has been news in comics lately. They were with Diamond exclusively for 25 years. But as the comic book retailer market shrunk from over 10,000 stores to under 2,000 stores, and then there was the big health event and stores were closed down, DC had been already, obviously, not even DC, WarnerMedia, one level above, somebody in finance was watching what the heck was going on. And what they saw was going on was these retail stores are going out of business one way or the other. Now, comic book stores will probably always be around, but there'll be fewer and fewer. And the ones that focus on reselling old comics are going to do a lot better than the ones that focus on selling new comics. Why? Because new comics has always been a terrible business. There was a small fraction of time that you could sell tons and tons and tons of new comics and you didn't have to discount them highly. And those stores did okay for a few years, like in the early 1990s. For the most part, the new comics business is a terrible business. So DC made a secret side deal with Midtown Comics and another company, DCBS. What's a secret side deal? They said, okay, we'll distribute directly to you two companies, and you can sell to the rest of the fan stores, the collector stores. So why these two companies? Well, these two companies were professional. DC knew who they were. They said, okay, you guys can set up a distribution company. So they came up with two different new distributor names, but it's really the same company. And they said, okay, we'll sell comics through you. And then ultimately they were talking about continuing with Diamond, but they just said, you know what? Nah, forget Diamond. We'll just sell to the collector stores through these two outlets. Easier for DC, less worry for DC. And as far as these two operations are concerned, they already sell direct to consumer. So they have thousands of individual customers already. So they add another 1,000 each retail stores, maybe, if that. Maybe it's more like 500 each. And they treat them the same way that they treat direct to consumer. In fact, one of them just recently told retail stores they will no longer provide a phone number for customer service. All the correspondence has to be in writing, either through live chat or emails. So they're not interested in even giving customer service on a wholesale basis. I told Steve Jeppe, who owns Diamond Comics, and I know him a little bit from back in the day. I'm sure he's aware, because he's a very sharp man. This is just the move to basically focus on direct-to-consumer sales. If you notice these pages I keep flipping through, this is an upcoming comic, right? Its retail price is supposed to be $5.99. You can buy it for $3.59 at 40% off. A retail store could buy it maybe at 50% off. So I could buy one of these at 40% off the price for $3.59. A retail store could buy it for a little bit cheaper. They could buy it for $3. So their profit is between $3 and $3.59 at a retail store, if the retail store is able to resell it. The business is ruined. The whole purpose of non-returnable comics in the first place was so that collectors could get comics and never miss an issue. And the people that helped build the business, like Steve Jeppe early and Chuck Rosansky, were just buying comics and using them as a way to service customers who were buying their back issues. And it'll return to that over time, I'm sure. But that said, the thousands and thousands of direct-to-consumer customers that these two companies already have through their mail order operations, these guys are not buying books at the same prices that people are buying it in stores. You know, their experience is paying $3.89 or $3.59 for a $6 comic. So who's paying what's the market for selling a $6 comic? There really is none. There's very little. And then you take the cost of selling that $6 comic out of overhead, forget it. There's nothing left. So there's really no business there. That's why they're very happy to let the collector stores fall apart. As long as they can subsidize and support these two direct-to-consumer operations. And again, it's still it's a significant piece of business for DC Comics. It's a relatively small piece of business for WarnerMedia, and even smaller for AT&T. But whatever the collectors are, whoever they are, they're going to get their comics from DC exclusively through this retail mail order company, or this retail mail order company, or their store that buys through their distributor division of these two companies, if you see what I'm saying. Okay. Today, DC Comics is in a similar situation following a demoralizing mid-decade move from its traditional home in New York to Warner Brothers headquarters in Burbank. The company has stumbled through various events and line reboots. They had a bunch of reboots. None of them worked. Dan DiDio was let go as co-publisher. And before he was let go, he was complaining that reissues of comics from 30 and 40 years ago were outselling their current stories, and saying that was a failure on DC's new editorial. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. It was a failure of DC. They were not, if you can't outsell the old ones, well, you know, the new stuff you're producing just isn't good, which means the editorial focus isn't there of where it needs to be. They need to do a top to bottom look at what kind of new comics they should be publishing. Where do graphic novels fit in? What should they be doing with continuity? What should the continuity in canon be like in periodical publishing, single floppies, if they're going to continue to do that, versus what kind of leaps can they take with continuity and trying new ideas with the prestige format or trade paperbacks, the separate graphic novels. They have to think it through and decide what they want to do. But what they'll probably do is just shrink it a bunch. And eventually they'll get around to figuring out what they want to do with it. But there's going to be layoffs, and people have been warning that there are going to be layoffs at DC Comics. I agree. I think there are. I'm going to do another video about this. This is extensive, and it goes into issues I like discussing, like their focus on HBO Max's streaming and what they're going to do with their TV content and their film content, the new theatrical distribution structures, because there's going to be a lot more of PVOD, which is premium video on demand, which means selling the videos, selling new movies as soon as they come out, as they're already in theaters. It's pretty extensive, and it's pretty damned interesting. We'll do a whole separate video on that. Again, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications. Give me in the comments below what you thought of this video, where you think DC fits in with AT&T's vision for WarnerMedia. I'd love to get your 2 cents. You can go ahead and support me if you want at collegeofthedead.com. I'd love for you to check out the comic and see if it's something that you'd like. They ship immediately. And also sign up at epicmermaids.com to find out when we're going to launch the Epic Mermaid Fantasy Game of Thrones with mermaids called The Mermaids. I'll see you again soon with another video, and if I don't see you, I will miss you.